Just
Flag football related.
she does better playing than being goalie. When she's goalie, the butterflies take over, but when she's moving, she's much better. So it's like, yeah, I don't think goalie is for her.
Well, you'll get a kick out of this session. Welcome again to another session of the 17th annual Transforming the Teaching and Learning Environment Conference on 5AS. I'm your moderator. We are fortunate to have with us Dr. Heidi Gregory Mina from Northeastern University, business psychologist, professor, international speaker, and award-winning best-selling author specializing in management, leader engagement, and leadership development. And she's dedicated to empowering nonprofits and small businesses, strategic knowledge sharing, helping them scale sustainably and creating a lasting impact. Heidi is going to talk about harnessing AI for dynamic classrooms. And going forward, this is going to be a big thing in education, starting now and for years to come. Heidi, all yours.
Thank you, thank you. So I do have some slides. Am I able to share those, Bob?
Yes,
Looks like it.
indeed. Just go
Yes,
ahead and share.
perfect. There we go. Let me just start these. So we are a small enough group, so I'm more than fine taking questions whenever you guys have them. I'd like this to be a more, as it says, dynamic classrooms. I like to have it be a dynamic conversation as we're going along. I'm sure many of you being in the education space have felt the pressure of AI, what it means for the classroom, and the many discussions that even at Northeastern we've been having around AI, the ethics of AI, bringing them, how do we harness it for the classroom? Do we harness it for the classroom? And I think we've come ultimately to the realization that there is going to be some level of AI use. The question really comes around what do we feel, what policies are we going to make, and what do we feel is the best for our classroom? So today I'm going to talk a little bit about, if I can get my slides to actually move, I'm going to talk a little bit about all of the things I just kind of mentioned. We'll talk a little bit about different learning experiences. We'll talk about some examples of what some of the universities are currently doing. I'll also talk a little bit about what I am doing in my own classroom, harnessing AI and testing and beta testing different things. And again, please guys, just feel free to pop questions either into the chat or just come on camera and ask your questions as we go along. I will leave questions and answers also for the end. But I know sometimes we want to ask the question just as we're going, which I am perfectly fine with as well. So the first thing I wanted to talk a little bit about is what is the current role of AI in modern education and how are we utilizing it currently? So at this point in time, we're really looking to maintain that personalization, right? That's what everyone's concerned about. How do we keep that personal touch in the classroom? How do we make sure that the students are actually learning the material? That is probably the biggest conversation that we're having. And while we're having that conversation, we're talking about how do we revamp assignments? How do we revamp the way we measure success for the students, recognizing that to some level of degree, they're going to be using AI in their assignments, that we're going to be bringing it into the classroom. So how do we get the two pieces to work in harmony and work in unison? And some of the things that we've been doing now is working on automations, what automations are going to work. A lot of these automations are still in the beta testing phase to ensure that it works properly, because any of you that have tested or worked with AI, some of these new tools that are coming out, you can definitely tell just right from the very beginning that the output that it's giving is not always 100% accurate. Just the other day, it was trying to tell me that 25 plus 2 was 25. And I'm like, okay, clearly that's wrong. And so the biggest ethical concern that I have with this is that if students are using it, do they have the proper knowledge base to validate the information that they're receiving, or are they just taking it at face value? And most likely, from the students that I've been working with, they're taking it at face value. And that's very problematic for them to get critical learning skills, deeper analysis into things, and just basically getting the base learning to carry it over. One thing it has been helping a lot with is identifying learning gaps in the classroom. So I don't know about you guys, my classes have been growing and growing and growing in numbers. I first started, maybe my class size was around 19, a very manageable size. And now each of my classes are around 40. And you multiply that out amongst, 4 or 5 sessions, you're talking about dealing with 200 plus students. And, just by the time you get through the grading, to even have the time to come up for air to say, okay, let me look at the data and see, are there students that are falling behind? And I will be honest, I probably don't look at that until the school prompts me to say, hey, check-in time for this. And that's the time I look at it. But I still find sometimes that, maybe we can do a better job of getting on top of that. And that is something that data, AI and data insights can help with by alerting us as professors to students who might be struggling earlier on, where we might not have had the time yet to really take the time and look and see that. And we can kind of intervene a little bit quicker. So that's kind of the role so far that, we've been using it for, that we've been dealing with. One of the things that I thought would be really interesting is to talk about some of the tools that are out there and how they're being used and which universities are using different things. So one of the things that we've been moving towards at Northeastern, it's more for our tutoring system. We get a high demand for tutors and we don't have enough student volunteers to keep up with the demand half the time. And so what we've been starting to look at is, are there alternative AI tools that we can put in place to help with learning and tutoring and supplement that with students in between that. And so we've been implementing some of our own personal courses that some professors have been putting together as kind of like a one-on-one type course. We use courses out of Coursera, Udacity we've been using as well. And what's really neat about this is that the AI analyzes the student responses and adapts for future learning modules. So what we've been seeing is, if a student's struggling in a certain area and wasn't able to work through the questions, they're not going to push them along and give them something harder. They're actually going to back it up and make the next module easier and start breaking down those core concepts again until the student is showing and demonstrating that they are learning and that they are catching on to the material. As they demonstrate that successfully, then it'll adapt and it'll give them harder learning modules as they go along. Again, we're not utilizing this in lieu of a human being. We're using this as an additional tool for students along with the in-person tutoring. So everything that we've been doing has all been in conjunction with still having that personal touch in there. The big thing that we are in discussions around, and we are not currently using them, but these are the ones that we're looking at, is grading, right? Giving feedback, providing assessments to students. I'm sure you guys have all been there with me, the hours upon hours upon hours of grading. Some of you may be fortunate enough to have an amazing TA that can help with that. I have been one of those individuals who have foregone and not done the TA. I've done the grading myself. Initially, when I began teaching 15 years ago, I did take on a TA at that time because I thought it would be beneficial. I unfortunately did not have the same luck with TAs as some of my colleagues have had, so I just chose to stick with grading things myself. I felt like it kept a deeper connection with my students as well, because I was able to read and see their thought processes. I could see where there were themes across the classroom, across assignments better, where they were struggling, that I could address then in the classroom the next time we met. So grading is something I still do myself, do very manually myself. Gradescope, EDX AI grading system, these are both tools that we've been looking at to try to automate the grading. The edX one is doing more short answer, essay-based type questions. The big problem with them is it's a lot of upfront work because it's machine learning. So you have to teach the machine basically. So if you have, like I do, I kind of have like a database of certain response. Like if I'm finding myself term after term saying kind of the same thing over and over and over and over again, I keep those databases of those comments. That way I'm not always recreating the wheel every single time. You would train the AI with these responses. So it would be in your words, in your language, the way you would say things. And as it evaluates something that it doesn't have a response for from you, it would kick it back to you for your response. And what it would do is it would learn. So in the future, as it found something that met a certain criteria and that comment should be applied to that criteria, it would learn and never ask you again. I think my issue with this is the same fear that I had with the TA is I, is the information going out to the students okay? Are they getting quality feedback? Is it the feedback that I truly would have wanted them? Did the AI miss something? And so with any of these type of systems, a lot of beta testing has to go into it to have a human looking at this before it goes to the students to make sure that it is accurate until you get to a point that you are comfortable with it, that you can truthfully say that, okay, it's giving the information out the way I would want it to go out. Gradescope's another one. That one's more for multiple choice. It also does a lot. It does some short answer, not really great on the short answer. And it does do some work in the coding area. That's kind of where we're at in terms of automating feedback and assessments. It's been a big discussion. I would say we're a long ways away from considering anything in that area outside of probably multiple choice. I think we've all been using some sort of automation for multiple choice questions for a very long time. But it's those open essay-based questions. We've also been having conversations around the idea, do we even give those as exam questions anymore? If they're in-person exams, that might be okay. If the exams are online, what can we do to ensure that they're not popping on AI to get the answers and to bring them back into the exam? So that's been the other thing, is like, should we just be changing the structure of the assignments in the classroom? And in a little bit, I'll talk about a couple of things that I've beta tested in my classroom that seem to have gotten good response and have been working pretty well so far. I apologize. There's like a delay in my slides moving. There we go. Chatbots and virtual assistants. Now, this is where it's at for me. Georgia State University introduced a virtual assistant chatbot to help with summer melt last year. And it actually helped. They figured out that it was about 21% of their students did better because of this. So it was the reminders, the support, the extra, cheerleading during that time of like, it's nice weather. I just want to be outside. I don't want to sit here and write an assignment. So they found that having a chatbot during that time, in addition to the professor, this did not take away the professor. It was just an additional tool that was what they found to be very effective. ChatGPT does student assistance for coursework queries, and you can build chatbots through it. So one of the things that I did just introduce to my organizational behavior course is I have my first chatbot. And what the chatbot was set up to do is it received the syllabus, It received all the assignments. And I always keep a database as I go through these courses that I teach of FAQs, so questions that are constantly coming up. So I did a lot of upfront training on the chatbot to be able to answer questions for the students. I'm beta testing it this term with 4 of my classes. So far, it's been working fantastic. The students love it. The students know that it's a chatbot. They know it's being beta tested. So, there was full transparency around this. They also know that it is not meant to be in replace of talking to me about course related content. Like, it doesn't take away their connection to me, but it's there for a simple question, such as, we have a case study coming up. Do you want this in APA format? They can quickly ask the chatbot first before turning to me. That's something I already have programmed as an auto response into my chatbot. So they would get the response back, yes, please use APA 7th edition. And then it can help them if they have any questions about how to use 7th edition, they can continue to have that conversation with the chatbot, something that they don't necessarily need me for. If the chatbot runs into a question that they cannot answer for the student, they will direct the student back to me. The chatbot will also send me the question, so I will know if this was a redirected question from the chat box. So what I will then end up doing is, obviously I will assist the student, but I will also go back and I will assist the chatbot, and I will tell the chatbot, what was the response that I gave the student, because as this chatbot grows and learns, and I give it more information every time a question comes up that it can't answer, I am able to then give it more data. So in the future, if that question arises again, it can go ahead and it can answer it. I can also set parameters around styles of questions that I just do not want the chatbot ever to answer. Obviously things around extenuating circumstances, like asking the chatbot for an extension on an assignment. No, my chatbot's going to say you need to talk to the professor. So there are parameters around which it funnels the student back to me. But it does take that administrative burden off for those repetitive questions. And I'm sure, just like myself, many of you have stood in class and explained assignments in detail to only be asked at the end of class the same questions you explained in full detail 20 minutes earlier, and then a plethora of emails as the assignment gets closer to things you have already answered multiple times. And it's just kind of human nature and the way things go. So I have found this to be very helpful and very exciting. If this does work well in this class, and all signs so far are showing that it is, I will be rolling this out to all my future courses as well. And I also teach at Southern New Hampshire and Purdue Global. I will be rolling it out to those classrooms as well. I find that where those classes are 100% online, that something like this will be a great asset and benefit to the students who, for whatever reason, tend to not want to ask me questions unless they absolutely have to. So I feel like having another source for them will be good for them to get some basic information. The other things that we are doing is we're doing a lot of work with lesson plan development. And I'm going to be the first to say I design all my lesson plans now, starting with AI. Just like I would tell a student to never rely on AI to be accurate, I also tell myself never to rely on AI to be accurate in designing a course. But I spend hours upon hours upon hours curating the perfect assignments, curating the perfect references, resources, YouTube videos, where because I have a learning tool that I've trained quite well into my style, what I am looking for, to take a half an hour to feed it information about what I'm looking for this class, exactly giving it its parameters. It can go out and it can find quizzes, resources. It can put together lesson plans. It can generate personalized assignments with grading rubrics, everything for you. what would literally take me months to do, it does in about, when I'm doing a full course, it takes about 5 to 10 minutes for it to come back with everything. Now, in that 5 to 10 minutes, is it perfect? Absolutely not. That's now where the human side has to come back in and really dig in and look through it and ask it either to go do more research on certain areas, or you start bringing in additional things that you would say. And when I'm fully done with it, I go back through it and make sure that it reads like something I would write. If it missed some resources that I would normally want to have in there, I add them in. So it's not a cookie cutter, hey, take this and just put it into your classroom by any means, but it certainly does help to expedite and save time in course development areas. But again, as I tell everybody, and I feel like it's a broken record, but it's the whole ethics behind it. You still need the expert who knows what they're doing at the end of the day, looking at the output. Doesn't matter what it is. That's any AI tool, any industry, anything that you're doing. If you're using AI and you're not the expert in it, the expert needs to have eyes on it before you move forward with it. We're not at a point where it can just be like, here you go, and just trust that it's 100% accurate. So ScribeSense, Newton, ChatGPT, these are all great tools to look into in terms of helping to generate content generation. DeepSeek is now out there. I have not personally had enough time yet with DeepSeek. They've been having too many issues crashing, too many people trying to get on it that I haven't been able to really work with it and validate it. The little bit that I have done seems very similar to Chat GBT, but I find Chat GBT to be extremely powerful for these specific type of needs. So the other thing that we are seeing a lot where this is helping a ton in the classroom are students with disabilities, right? And we are able to set things up so text can be read aloud. We can make sure that captions are there, no problem. Before that was so difficult to do, but taking a video that somebody gives you and adding captions to it, translating it into written text from the actual videos. All of these things are helping students a lot. A lot of my students who come into class, I encourage them to bring a AI note taker with them if we are in a Zoom type setting, because, and this is just how we learn as people, I don't want them taking notes while I'm talking. And I know that sounds very odd to say, but the problem is when students are taking notes, they have stopped listening. They're now repeating what I had said. They're writing it down. They're missing the remainder of the content because they're trying desperately to get these notes taken. And then they're refocusing on the conversation and they might have missed something critical. So if they bring in their AI note takers into the classroom and let them actually take notes for them, they can then focus more deeply into the content. And what I have been finding is students have been more engaged. They've been asking more questions because they're hearing more. I'm also able to keep more engaged on the nonverbal side with students because their heads aren't down like trying to type notes. They're actually looking and I can see their facial expressions. I can see moments of, okay, I got that. Or like these looks of like confusion, or even just looks of like, oh, she has no idea what she's talking about. And I will call them right out. I'll be like, all right, some of you guys seem like you might be confused by this. What is confusing? And we'll have a deep conversation about it. And especially a lot of them have come, being at Northeastern, a lot of them have come from co-op situations. So they're thinking back to their work experience and they're saying, I didn't see that in my work experience. I don't know what she's talking about. So we talk about, different cultures. We talk about different things that happen, different experiences. So by enabling us to automate that part and take that off the table for the students, I've been able to see an increase in engagements with the students in the classroom. The downfall, and so I've had to put policies in place around this. If we are on Zoom, 100% on Zoom, they will send their note taker and not come to class and think just sending their note taker is sufficient. And so I have had to up my policies in my syllabus that encourages the AI note taker, but I've had to put rules around why it is there, how we are using it, and how it pertains to participation. And that if they're not in the classroom and it's just their note taker, they will still be considered absent. So, that's one of the biggest things when it comes to the note taker system. So the other big thing, and I don't know about you guys, but I love gamification. Anything that we can learn to have fun, to bring the learning together, to bring practical and theory is it. I've been using gamification in my classrooms for years now. And now we have more AI generated options as well. So Kahoot, I can tell you, I can do without the music at this point that Kahoot brings with it, but it is really cool. And Kahoot AI Analytics has now created a way for professors to set up quizzes, and the questions will either get hard or easier, and they generate the questions. You just have to tell them what type of question banks you want. Questions will get harder or easier depending on the student's ability to respond correctly. So we've had a lot of fun with that in the classroom. And so the other AI area that I've been personally working on is AI generated simulations. I'm sure all of you are familiar also with using Harvard case studies. Harvard just came out with three or four, I believe, case study simulations that are now all AI driven. I have not had a chance to look at that. That literally just came out yesterday. The one that I am working on is actually ones that I am building myself for my own class. And what it does is students log in at the beginning of the term, they get an interface, and they can see there's a leaderboard and stuff, and they can see how they're doing in comparison to their classmates. Now, their classmates don't get to see the decisions that they're making and things. It's just a rating system, and it makes it a little bit of like a competition, but they work through real world scenarios. These are not AI generated scenarios. These are real world case study scenarios, and they have to make real world decisions. And based on their decisions, obviously it goes in different directions, but the whole thing was put together through AI. And what it enables us to do is it enables me to set it up that every student can either have the same case, I can assign groups to cases, or I can have all 40 students doing a different case. And what I like about that to a certain degree is when it's groups, each group doing a case, they really can't talk to another team and say, hey, we're stuck in an area, what would you do? And especially when the students are working individually, having that ability to give them each a unique experience, and they can't crosswalk that and talk to other people when they get stuck. They have to make the decisions for themselves in real time. And I'm starting to use this in lieu of one written case study in the class, because one written case study in the class has been led to just a AI generated response. And what I'm finding is that while the response is, I can't say it's inaccurate what they're giving me, you can tell it lacks a depth of analysis that we as professors would be looking for. And so, that's one of the things that I really trying to say is I push them and I tell them, like, you guys have to go deeper with your analyses. And I'm like, if they're going to continue doing this, what's another way we can do this? And to ensure they go to that deeper level in learning, deeper level in decision making. And these AI driven simulations are fantastic for that, because it's them having to make those decisions. And then obviously having the leaderboard with their classmates and seeing how they're doing, they just love that. So again, this term I'm using it as a beta. The students love doing it, and we're having a great time with it. I can report back at the end how exactly it turned out, but so far there's been no bugs. We've been moving along quite nicely, and it's really added a nice dimension to the classroom for this particular learning. Another way that there's been a combination of AI generated simulations and chatbots working together, we've been seeing them popping up for students who are studying to be psychiatrists or psychologists. So during their training, they obviously have practical experiences that they have to go and do, and so many hours. But in the classroom, there's case studies. And a lot of the top tier universities in the past brought in actors and actresses to actually act out patient skits for the students to be able to role play. And so now what they're doing and saving money is they're utilizing AI chatbots, and these chatbots are being told what type of diagnoses they want the student to be able to make, and they create the scenario, present the scenario to the student, and then the student has to make the diagnostics. And so it's been able to save them a lot of money. They've been able to do many more diagnostic trainings that way. And we're starting to see this, these real world scenario based things popping up in all different areas, especially in the medical field for students that are training in hands-on type simulation type work. And then the last one that I was going to talk about was getting into virtual and augmented reality. And so this is not one I have done yet with my classes, but I have done on my own. And I'm really thinking about bringing some of this to the classroom. And so one is that I'm considering, we do a whole section on cultural diversity. And we talk about, people's personalities in terms of cultural diversities, how to fully comprehend this and how to work with people from around the globe within the global marketplace. And so Google has Google Expeditions, and you can go on virtual field trips around the world. And so this is one of the things I'm planning on playing with. I'll probably end up doing this one over the summer term, but going on a virtual field trip to different areas around the world to really get more of an immersion type experience to learn beyond the textbook, right? Textbook learning is great. Everyone will tell you textbook learning only takes you so far when you're trying to learn about other cultures. And then the other one that is starting to pop up is for some science experiences and in history is Merge EDU. And so specifically with the sciences and stuff, they actually have the virtual 3D glasses, and they're going in and they're like virtually dissecting frogs and doing all these different things in the sciences, which is just amazing and extremely cost savings. What ends up happening though is it becomes a barrier for certain students who can't afford that level of technology still. The cost factor hasn't come down all the way on that. So there's still a lot of work in this particular area, but I think we are going to see a little bit more of this augmented and virtual reality in our classrooms as we move forward. All right. So, there's so many tools. I could go on probably for the next 5 hours of all the tools that are out there. They're coming up every day more and more. Just 2 days ago, Sintra just came out. Sintra is a series of, I think there's 36 of them in total. They're chatbots. You buy the chatbots individually or as a team, and they do pretty much everything from Salesforce management to everything business related you can imagine. It won't be long before they bring something out very similar for the educational field. The problem that I am seeing with them is they're coming to market too fast, and we have to be very weary of products that are coming too fast to the marketplace. There are a lot of errors. There are a lot of mistakes. Again, as I've been mentioning, I don't launch anything until I have fully tested it myself with a team of individuals. When we feel that it is working, I would say till we believe it's working to 100%, that's when I beta test it with my students. And they know they're not getting graded for it. They get extra credit, but they're not getting graded because it's a beta test. It's to see what their response is, how it works for them, what issues, and they give us feedback to bring back to the table because we want that tool that works pretty much in perfection before we launch it and make it a graded requirement. The biggest issue with AI other than some of the other ethical things that we have been talking about, is data privacy and security. There's still a lot of issues around that. That is why a lot of, especially universities, are opting to build in-house and keep the code in-house. A lot of them are saying, yeah, we're not building our chatbots off of ChatGPT because there's some security concerns. We have student data, we have all of these things. So they're building them in-house, but they're still using open code and they're using APIs. They're just purchasing them, bringing them in, and putting them behind their firewall. And so it's still the same technology at the end of the day. They're just putting a firewall in there for protection. So that's something we need to make sure that we're considering as you think about, okay, some of these things sound interesting. I might want to dabble in it. I might want to get my feet wet. I might want to, consult with somebody to see what might be some good possibilities for my particular classroom, because subject matter makes a difference. Student composition makes a difference, right? What would work for that? This is something we need to always be considering, is data privacy and security. That's also why through my chat box, my student will never be able to schedule meetings with me. And they will never be able to get any personal information from my chatbot. That anytime they ask anything in that realm, that's a parameter at which they have to come back to me, and that's a private conversation. The other big thing is biases that are popping up in AI algorithms. So AI algorithms can only do so much. It can't, it's learning at an extremely rapid rate, and it's continually building upon itself, but there are still biases that are popping up within the algorithms. And so we have to be very careful that we are training the data without biases going into it. We want to make sure that things are coming out fair and equitable, and that we're doing regular audits on all data sets that are going in to make sure that there is minimal bias going into the computers, because computers themselves can't create bias. They can only work with the data they're given. And so the bias comes from us entering data that might have some legitimate bias in it. Then we have the transparency and accountability in AI decision making, right? What is the fairness around doing this? Is this, how transparent are we that we're using it, and things of that nature. At the end of the day, I'll be honest with you guys, I had a really hard time with this. I have a very tech background, but I also have a very non-tech background. And I'm very much a business psychologist as much as I'm a computer scientist. And I had an ethical struggle because my first reaction was there was zero room for this in the classroom. That was my initial reaction. I said, AI should not be in there. Students need to learn. I started to panic about how our students going to learn. And then I said to myself, okay, this is the teacher side. This is the educational side. This is the concern for academics and learning. But this is still pretty cool. There's so many cool things out there. So you have on one side the little guy going, this is cool, play with it. And then you have over here, the students shouldn't use it. And it was a very hard reconciliation. And then I started to think about it, and I said, you know what? This is no different than any other time in history where we had a transformational time in technology. And if we use this as a tool in conjunction with ourselves and what we're already doing, I got to the point that I was able to reconcile and say that this is okay with me. But again, there has to be that balance between, we're not using this solely, we're using it as a tool to make ourselves more efficient and to provide better engagement and better opportunities for our students. And as long as that equation worked for me, then I was okay adding in the AI aspects to it. And the reality of it is, as a tool, it is there for our students now. And I feel as educators, it is our job to guide them and help them understand the ethical considerations that need to go into utilizing it, because it's not going to go away. And that's kind of what we're faced with at this point. And so I don't know if any of you guys have had discussions at your institutions around or your companies around your policy for AI. I will tell you, Northeastern still does not have one. Nobody, I don't believe anyone in Boston has yet, any of the big ones, MIT, Harvard, BU, BC. I don't think anyone has really come forward yet with a formal AI policy. They are very weary of, going out and accusing a student of using AI, and having it be wrong. And the dilemma also comes, there are certain areas like our computer science instructors who are doing coding are encouraging their students to go use AI if they get stuck coding. They said if you're writing the code and you get stuck, you can use it to help you find where you went wrong. And so, you have that dilemma of they're using it as a tool in the classroom, but yet you tell the students they can't use it as a tool for their work. So the discussion has been more around how do we change the nature of measuring their learning versus telling them they can't use it. And that's been where more the discussion has been. And because we don't have a firm path yet in those discussions, it's really hard to develop a full written policy behind it. But there will be a policy at some point in time once we determine how we're going to change how we measure our students. But I think a lot of the conversations has been around moving away from having them write a lot, having heavily written intensive courses, having it somehow more measured on site as to how they are doing and measuring their success in person or utilizing other tools such as the simulations, to really get that deep level analytics. I've also increased a lot of my class participation and changed a lot of the exercises that we do in class to really drive in-depth conversations, to see what they're thinking about, to demonstrate that they've been doing the reading, to see that they're linking their learning to their co-op experience. So really big pressure on that. This is what the theory states, but what does that look like in a practical application and setting? So that's how we've been kind of dealing with it at the moment. And a lot of it right now is still very much trial and error. So if you're thinking about implementing any of these things, there are some considerations to think about. Bringing it into a classroom, there needs to be some level of AI literacy before even going into this area. If there's to be training on this, your professors need to be able to troubleshoot these. The IT department, if you have thousands of chatbots around the campus, your IT department's not going to be able to handle debugging all of these things. So there is some level of AI literacy training that professors need to have if these things are going to be going into the classroom. Lots of pilot programs, as I talked about, for testing everything before actually saying it's good to go. And then just like any other software, looking at updates, looking at ways to make it better, more efficient, and just keep working on that. Again, best practice, balancing that AI automation with human interaction. That is huge. We do not want the students to feel that everything's been pushed off to a bot. I mean, we as human beings know even how that feels just when we try to make phone calls these days and we can't get a human being on the phone anymore. There still has to be that balance. And I think that when you learn and you get trained in AI and you learn what's available, you can find that nice sweet spot and balance between what can be automated, what can be used, and what can still be, that human touch and that human interaction. I tell you, when you can free up those hours in grading and you can free up, hours in course design and things like, it gives you more time to think about how can I engage my students? Oh, I got an alert, the student is struggling. Maybe I can get on a Zoom call. It won't be a situation of, oh, they're struggling and I have no idea when I'm going to have to carve out some time to meet with them. And I don't know when I can do that because, all these exams need to be graded by Friday, and that's going to take up every minute I have this particular week. And not that we don't want to help the student, but just, as the students complain, they're trying to balance things, we're balancing things too. And so by able to automate some of these steps, I do believe will lead to better teacher-student engagement in the classroom. Again, AI literacy on the other side of it. We have to equip our students with access to the AI tools that we're going to be using. We have to teach them how to use the tools. We can't just be like, hey guys, there's a chatbot and walk away from them. We have to explain to them and demo to them how it's going to be used. Even when using simulations, we want to make sure they're set up, make sure the students have the instructions for logging in, accessing them, troubleshooting. One of the things I will be adding into the AI simulation that came out of this, I will be adding in a real-time chatbot to the simulation because there have been questions that came up, and these are now questions I'm collecting that this chatbot will have. So the first course of defense as you're working through the simulation, because they can answer your question 24/7, is to ask the chatbot. If it's been something that's been asked before, the chatbot will be able to respond to the student can continue on. And then if it hits a decision-making point where it can't answer the question again, that kickback will then come back to me. So it's all about trying to streamline where we can. And, and also just students who are still living in economically depressed areas that may not have the best of reception. There are still areas struggling with internet connections. We're talking about things that some of them can't even fathom putting their hands on because they still struggle with just the basics. So, that's the other consideration is how do we invest into our student base to make sure they have the technology tools and access to the tools they need to be successful if we're integrating these type of things into the classroom. And then ultimately, at the end of the day, we want to do things that are going to create deeper levels of critical thinking and more collaboration. Because let's face it, what are the future going to be for these students graduating? Lots of collaboration, lots of innovation, lots of creativity that all comes from your ability to think outside the box, to take some level of risk, and to do things that are different. And being in an atmosphere that allows you to do something that's different. So that critical thinking is very important. All right, just want to make sure time-wise that I have enough time. I think I've already, throughout my conversation, talked a lot about these things. I'll just talk very briefly here again. Lack of training, high costs, the digital divide, all challenges. We just kind of talked a little bit about that. So I don't think there's any need to go any deeper there. The evolving role of educators as mentors. So that's the big trend now that we're focusing on as well. And I haven't really mentioned that. I've mentioned it in a roundabout way by saying, we have more time to engage with our students. What we're really trying to say is that we can be a greater mentor now for our students where we have, automations in place to free up the time to be able to do that. In the past, we might connect with a student here or there, do a little coaching, but let's face it, by the time one class ends, we're already syllabus is done, course design is done, we're ready to rock and roll right into that next group of students. It's really hard to continue to maintain those connections all the time. And then other things that are future-based that we can bring in for career counseling for students, LinkedIn Learning AI can help a lot with them to develop their career path. So we're starting to see some of that in that area where we're very heavily dominated towards co-ops at Northeastern. We use a lot of the LinkedIn Learning AI in their co-op and career counseling sessions. And then we have at Northeastern, we have some mental health services that are AI based. Again, it's only because we've been inundated with students who have been showing higher levels of stress, anxiety, depression than we ever have before. And we just don't have enough human resources to provide it. So they have alternative to dealing with academic stress, but it's being used in conjunction with people. And then we have NLPs in place, which are basically AI tutors that help with language processing. So students whose English isn't the same second language, they're struggling in the classroom, they can use these tools as the professor's talking to get clarification. And that'll help them make sure that they fully comprehend exactly what it is that they need to learn. All right, I'm getting the top of the hour notice. I think I've covered everything and then some that I planned on covering today. So I'll just kind of open up the last couple of minutes here, as long as Bob says I have those couple of minutes. If anyone has any questions, I am happy to chat.
Just like the previous session, we could go on talking about
I know, right?
this for hours.
I
There's
know.
so
I'm
many.
like, it makes you say like, okay, where's the starting point and where's the stopping point? Because I'm like, I could talk about this tool for 3 hours and then I could go talk about this tool. It's just so much.
Yeah, and yeah, I could do a whole conference, I think, about this in
Absolutely.
education.
Yep, absolutely.
Uh, well, we need to move to the next session,
All
and
right. Well, thank you very much, everyone. It was a pleasure.